Hi, I'm Paula Marie, and this is a very special holiday episode of Black Girls Do Have Amazing Superpowers. So, before we get into it, I need you to get into it and click that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes of our video podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Black Girls Do Have Amazing Superpowers with your girl, Paula Marie. Let me ask you something. What's your superpower? Alrighty, enough of that. Let's get into validating grief and how do we handle that throughout the holidays. Every winter, I do a holiday segment. This year, instead of doing it alone, right, or having a workshop and a roundtable, I wanted to really reach out to my friend. Okay, she's like my COVID bestie because we bumped into to each other on these internet streets during COVID, and I really, really like her style as a therapist. And hopefully, when you see her, you'll understand why. Raven Waterman, we're going to have a conversation about how to navigate through grief during the holidays. This is not a how to because everybody's journey is different, but it is a celebration of honoring everybody's individual paths and journey throughout this process. We also talk about the village that you have around you and how your village can be of service to you and handle you as you navigate through all these little journeys in your grief struggle, right? Your highs and your lows. So I'm hoping that there will be one thing that you get out of this that will help you in navigating through that space, whether you're a grief survivor or whether you're part of the village. It's my honor also to be able to continue this conversation because this is my mission to be of service, just to honor my son, Payla James Daniels. So stay tuned. Hello, hello, hello. This is Paula Marie, and this is a very, very special session that we're having. So every year, I normally do a workshop on how to deal with grief during the holidays because that's a touchy subject that we don't talk about with such a festive time of the year. And for those of you who don't know my story, my personal story is that I lost my son at the age of 18, and this is the 10-year anniversary of us losing him. So it's very important, I think, especially during COVID, for us to really touch on those that are grieving, what those triggers are, and how the support team, the village of those persons can be of service to them and to really help support them during the holidays. And also to give you some strategies on how to deal with it yourself. Because I find that sometimes the support village, they just don't have the tools, they just don't know or even understand. So I this year decided to give you a special treat and not have you just listen to me and my story, but I wanted to bring in my friend who is an expert in this field. And I'm going to bring her on to introduce herself to you.
Hi, thank you for having me on again. I love you and love the show, so it's wonderful to be back on. I'm Raven Waterman. I am a licensed therapist and executive leadership coach in New York. I'm the owner of Ravens Wings LLC. And yeah, I'm glad to be here to talk about this topic because it's definitely one that is coming up a lot for people that I'm working with, and I'm sure for a lot of your viewers, your listeners. So I think this is a great opportunity to really talk about this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I met Raven during the pandemic and like we now go together because she's my go-to person. I love her energy, I love her spirit, but I also love how she's able to validate and then break things down in layman's terms that we who are going through it feel it can understand it in bite-sized pieces and not feel overwhelmed. So I always feel better after talking to Raven. So Raven, when I broached you about this subject, And you did mention earlier in your intro that this is something that some of your clients are experiencing. What's the first thing that comes to mind for you when you, in your professional mind, when you're thinking about the holidays and those of us that are dealing with grief?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there there's no one size fits all. And for some people, this will certainly be a time where, especially if the loss is newer, where they're really trying to figure out how to adjust. There's sometimes can be a sense of guilt about, well, I'm still gonna enjoy the holiday or participate in the holiday season, and I should be in mourning, right? And so is that okay? So I think the first thing that comes up is that, one, there's no one size fits all, that this time of year, depending on, when the losses happen, can be really tricky for lots of people to navigate. And that, to give yourself permission to still enjoy the day, the time, and also, commemorate the person that you lost and that you love.
Yeah, I'm tearing up already, and I don't even have any thought of trigger of why I'm doing that. But I guess it's just my body's way of just releasing the energy that I have that I'm not acknowledging
Hmm.
around this subject. And I think that speaking as someone who's a grief survivor, because that's what I term us as grief survivors, because we are surviving the grief, is that there's many different roles that we have to play throughout the day, throughout the times of the day, the seconds of the day, and to be able just to live in this world that's always moving and changing and not stopping for our emotion, our grief, our triggers. And so, do you find there's some code switching that happens to those that are struggling with grief? And when I say code switching, code switching in the Black community is us changing up how we are and how we move in certain demographics and environments, right? Do you think that that also applies to us grief survivors as well, trying to just survive in this space that's always constantly moving, and us trying to keep up with the pace of the world, even though our speed is much slower?
Yeah. Yes. I think what happens is that when you experience a loss early, initially, everybody is sort of focused on that loss, and you can feel like, okay, it's okay to really be expressive about how I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And then, time passes after the services or memorials and things like that, and it can, I think, for the survivor, because I like that grief survivor, it can feel like, okay, I should, I shouldn't talk about this. I have to present as though I'm okay now. And I'm just moving on. Right. And so then what happens, I think, is there's a tendency to show up like, yeah, I'm good. I'm okay. And in reality, you are becoming okay, but it's a process, and there are going to be days that are way harder than other days. And so that belief that I have to show up like I still got it all together, I think can also create a lot of internal conflict and feeling of isolation, because you're not sure, is it okay to bring this up anymore, right? Everybody else seems like, they're just moving forward. And then I think it also can create a sense of, well, why am I not? Right. And
Right.
so that sort of narrative of like, well, why am I not? Why am I still stuck here? Why am I still hurting? And in reality, it's because that is the reality of your grief process. There isn't this turnaround, this quick turnaround time, and it can be, years when things will bring up associations and memories and feelings. And in reality, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm glad that you said that because in the beginning process, everybody's around you. I always say that everybody's around you that first week. and it thins out. And then after the service, you're alone. You are, you have these large pockets of time where you're by yourself and you're trying to figure it out. And when people come around you, they literally want to make sure you're good. They want to make sure you're okay. And sometimes they don't understand that you being okay looks the way it looks. Like, it is sad, it is heavy, it is a lot of hurt, it is a lot of pain, it's a lot of regret, it's all of those things that you're processing because you're finally by yourself to really allow yourself to feel. And I feel like the village, our villages that are supporting us, need to really get some understanding that it's okay for the person that you love, the grief survivor, to cry, to feel the sadness, to feel the hurt. And there's nothing that you can do to change that, because that's their grief process. But there are things you can do to not stuff it. Because sometimes I feel like everybody wants you to just be okay,
Yeah.
and you're not okay. You are going through your process. So if you were to talk to a support group, family members, friends that are there trying to figure out what's the best way for me to support my friend, my family, my loved one that's going through this, what things would or suggestions would you give them in terms of still honoring that grief survivors process?
Thank you. I think that one thing I would say is I think people tend to shy away from things when they feel helpless with it, or they feel like I don't have a solution, or it just makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to trigger the person. Somebody who's had a significant loss, is that loss is not really ever far from mind, so at least not initially. So the likelihood that you're going to trigger it by bringing it up is pretty slim to none. um, but if you I would say that thinking about, like, for example, the holidays, if you know that the person who passed had a birthday coming up, or just even a random Tuesday after the fact, to just say, hey, I just want you to know I am thinking about you. How are you doing today? And sometimes, because people know, oh, you're asking to be nice, they'll say, I'm fine. It's okay to say, no, really, I want to know, how are you doing today? Is today an okay day? Is today a hard day? I think it's okay to acknowledge, honestly, I just wanted to check on you. I know I don't have the right words. I know there's no words that are going to change this experience from you, but I'm here. I want to listen. I want to know if there's some way that I can be here for you. And it's important to do that after the fact, after the services, after the memorial, even sort of set kind of a reminder for yourself. Okay, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, you may have been talking to the person all along, but in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I need to make sure, if I have not asked about specifically how are they dealing with the loss of, and the person's name, right? Refer to that person. you know I want to know, this is a space we can talk about it. I'm here, and I don't know what to say, but I still want to be here for you. I think that's so powerful. And so, you don't need to try to fix it. They're not looking for you to fix it. What can you really say to fix it? But what I think matters is that you are saying to this person, I have not forgotten, right? And I'm not expecting you to be okay because, a week has passed, a month has passed, a year has passed.
10 years
Mm-hmm,
has passed.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So two things I got from that is, one, Set a reminder, which is so critical now in COVID because every day looks like the same day, every hour looks like the same hour. We're working from home, school, home with our kids. Like we don't have those ways to compartmentalize like pieces of our world. Everything lives in one space. So we tend to lose time just as a person in this season, right? So
Mhm.
set a timer where you are being intentional and not forgetting, making an appointment to check in with your grief survivor. And the second one, oh, I just lost it. It was on the tip of my tongue and then I lost it.
It'll come back to you.
Oh, say their name.
Yes.
Second one. And that's actually one of the things I talk about when I do my workshop every year on how to help grief survivors through this holiday season is that I think people are fearful to say their name,
Mhm.
because I'll take myself as an example. When I say Paler's name,
Mhm.
in the beginning, I just bawled. Even today, there are moments that I will bawl.
Mhm.
I'm stronger in it now. You know,
Mhm.
I have a better understanding in my grief process of where I am now, so I don't do that. But I need to hear his name and say his name so that you don't forget that I have two sons,
Mhm.
not just one.
Mhm.
And that's important. You know, that life meant something. So to say the name, acknowledge the name, to type the name, to print the name is very important for me because it keeps that person alive, that spirit of that person alive and not forgotten. And I think grief survivors, our village needs to understand that you're not going to make me not cry. I'm going to cry. You know, I'm crying now.
Mhm.
So look,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but that's part of my process because I have to continue to not only say his name, but give some value to his name in a way that's going to help other grief survivors in their villages understand that this process is just not a one size fits all, as you say,
Mhm.
and there's not a book.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
just simply have to be there and show up. I think that's important. So when it comes to the grief survivor, right? I do this every year, but this year is with COVID. Of course, we've all gone through like some really used like extensive circumstances, and so one of my closest friends that I went to college with passed away late, like not until November,
Mhm.
right? So this whole time I haven't really been affected. And then the day after Thanksgiving, another friend of mine lost her son. He
Mhm.
was in his 20s, right? So of
Mhm.
course that hit home for me. And so um, how I try to respond is to be there initially, but as you said, to circle back and show up when it's quiet,
Mhm.
when no one is checking, right?
Yeah.
But really watching both of those processes, it triggers my own grief. And so there are things I've learned in how to um, protect myself and allow myself to still go through my grief and not stuff. And one of the things that I've learned to do is when it's not time for me to show up, I don't show up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't give an explanation of why. I just say I'm not showing up,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
My village should know, right, that that's why and be there for me and cover me, right? The
Mhm.
other thing that I do is I allow myself to sit in whatever the trigger opens up. So it's kind of like a sore um, and it burst, right? You've got to let all of that come out so that it can heal. I allow myself to feel all the things that I'm going to feel. And sometimes that's me, pulling back because I don't want to I don't want to think about the other people in the room and making sure they're good with what I'm feeling. I
Mhm.
just want to protect myself and feel what I'm going to feel. And then the other thing is when the survivors are around me, I've become strong in these 10 years to just learn how to not um, not be their therapist in the process, not be their caregiver in the process, because the way that our village can react when we're strong can pull us down because they're so heavy. They feel so much grief. They feel so much emotion and empathy for us that instead of it wrapping us up, it kind of like weighs us down.
Mhm.
And so, is there a way for grief survivors during the holidays to not self isolate, um, or enter into a world where they are able to be social, even if it's I'm just going to mom's house?
Mhm.
Because I haven't gone to mom's house because mom's house is a trigger. Because I remember what happened last Christmas or 10 years Christmas ago or when they were 10. Is there a way that we can as grief survivors like start to kind of like take a dip a toe in the pond?
Right.
Okay, not a
Right.
whole foot, but
Right. Right. Don't
um,
jump all the way in yet.
yeah,
Just yeah.
but just so that we can kind of test it out and have the grace to pull back if it's too much for us in that moment.
Yes. Yes. The way to do that is to give yourself permission to do it. And I think that's true of any sort of environment or even people in our lives that can be emotionally triggering for us, right? We're talking specifically about grief, but there can be situations that you want to put a toe in, but you recognize or have recognized like the this type of situation or being with this particular person can bring up a lot of feelings for me. And so having a sort of, first of all, coming to some recognition of that, building some insight around that, and then
Mhm.
creating sort of a psychological safety plan. Okay, I'm going to go, I'm planning to spend, an hour. And when I feel like I'm either it's bringing up a lot for me, I'm going to make my exit. And maybe what I'll do, in some scenarios, you want to communicate that to the person ahead of time. I want to come, I want to be there, but I realize like I'm going to probably stay for about an hour and then I'm going to need to go. You may need, if you're going with, if there's other people in the space who know you well, you may need to say, listen, you see me starting to get a little bit upset or sad or something like that. Help me, tag me out, do something to kind of, or you may say, well, you know what, I'm going to go, but I'm going to bring a game with me. Because as long as we're doing an activity and we can kind of all, I can be busy, then I'll be able to manage it a little bit better. But all of that really requires you to give yourself permission to do what you need to do to be okay. And oftentimes we either feel guilty, like, oh, but I shouldn't, oh, but that's going to disappoint, oh, or people and sometimes people are not making us feel guilty. That's an internal thing. And sometimes people
Mhm.
do make you feel guilty. And so to be able to say, I have to center me. I want to be a part of this, but I need to keep me front and center and not stay past what I can really tolerate right now emotionally. And also, understanding that people can't read your mind. They really don't know what you need sometimes. And so if you go into a space and it's a day where you don't really want to talk about the loss, then just saying, you know what, today I just want to show up and have a good time. And I don't want to talk too much about that. I love you all. Thank you all for asking, but I really want to just focus on being with you today, right?
Mhm.
Or, so I think it's also recognizing that, as much as it would be beautiful if people just knew when to ask and what to ask, and how not to make it too heavy for you, they don't know. And we can tend to hold back ourselves and not express what is your need in the moment so that people can follow your lead. I do want to just also highlight the use of therapy I think sometimes people only think about therapy if and when they are really falling apart, or the workshop you do, for example, the grief survivors workshop. People only think about those things, like, oh, well, I'm really struggling. And I would say, build that in. You had a loss. You may be feeling like, I think I'm doing okay. And still get those supports, participate in those things that will help you to process moments that you may not even anticipate,
Right.
right? In a way that, friends and family who love you may not be able to help you to process the way that you really need to.
Absolutely. So, like you hit it right on the head. It's like you're in my head. I tell you, this is why I love you so much, right? Because in the workshop that I do talk about educating your village,
Mhm.
like telling your village out loud, like the things that you need and require from them, and that it's going to change and evolve as you grow in your grief journey, right? And because it doesn't have an expiration date, this grief journey, like this, I will always have a pocket of that inside of me forever. You know, how I manage and move through that will change as I grow and evolve in my grief journey. So I do talk about like educating your village, and I love what you said about having an exit plan, like thinking it out. So the dinner doesn't have to be 6 hours.
Right.
The dinner could be, hey Raven, what time is dinner going to be served? 6 o'clock. I'm going to get there at 5:55
Mhm. Mhm.
because that's all I can really take. I'm going to sit for dinner and I am going to leave after dinner. So having that conversation in advance with the host, your mom, your aunt, your cousin, your sister, whoever, or you know what, I'm not going to show up for dinner, but I will show up for games after dinner because that's a little lighter.
Mhm.
Just so that you are affirming what you need and
Mhm.
what your boundaries are, because I feel like the thing that I didn't have is I wanted everybody to just know I was grieving. I wanted you to just understand that I'm grieving, and I wanted you to pull the boundaries around for me so I didn't have to. And it wasn't until I was strong enough to say, I'm not going to family day this year,
Mhm. Mhm.
and taking the time to really like get myself together to get back into that environment, because that environment they hold a lot of triggers for me. I need a pen so I can write the stuff down. It's some good stuff here, some good stuff. But also the thing that I wanted to really talk about and make sure that we're providing just some tips for this is really for the village, right?
Mhm.
And it's really a support piece of material for the grief survivor. So if the grief survivor, can't articulate yet what they need,
Mhm.
maybe there's some things in this conversation that they do need, and they can refer this out and say, hey, this is a great interview that actually talks about some of the things that I need. It may be, I would like for you to view it, because sometimes we don't have the voice
Right.
to articulate,
Right.
especially when it's so fresh and so new. But also when the trigger is so heavy and so hot.
Mhm.
And we know with grief, those triggers make us feel like it just happened that same day.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like the emotion of it, the way your body like internalizes it without your brain connecting to it, but
Mhm.
your body will just emote the grief for you. And so let's turn into the grief survivor, um, because I've got my tree. It's
Mhm.
probably got 10 ornaments on it, but
It's
but
up.
it
It's
looks
up.
amazing, don't it?
I like it's up.
And I haven't had a tree in 3 years just because of just bouncing around and moving and things like that. And I finally dug, and it was in the back of my storage unit. So literally, I went in last week and dug through all of the things because I was going to get all 8 of my boxes of ornaments.
Mhm.
And now I'm in a season of purging. So one thing about the holiday season for me that I've always tried to always do, um, is put my tree up because I
Mm-hmm.
have ornaments specific to my kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to be able to pick out the ornament of Paler when he was in the fourth grade, to be able to pick out the ornament that he made when he was in the second grade or the first grade that I still have and hang it on the tree. Those are part of my traditions that I've always like pushed myself through, even though I may have been crying as I was putting those ornaments on the tree. But even though those ornaments were triggers for me, they were gratifying moments for me because I got to really celebrate and remember my
Mm-hmm.
boy and
Mm-hmm.
celebrate those memories. And so I always think that it's important to hold on to whatever traditions that you have when you're able to that celebrate your loved ones. And if you don't have them, to create them. This is an opportunity to really celebrate um, the life and the spirit and the love and the legacy of your loved one. And even something as simple as the ornament that they made in the first grade celebrates that in some way. Is there emotionally, is there a way that you would, or would you even suggest that? Let me go back to you because I'm coming from it from this end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So would you even suggest that that's even something that's a good idea to do, to keep those rituals alive during the holiday to keep you present?
Yeah. As you were talking and saying traditions, I was also thinking and right, rituals, traditions, rituals, and
Mhm.
if it, keeping ones that feel right and meaningful to you, creating ones that feel right and meaningful to you. um and so I think that absolutely that is something that can be very healthy and helpful to do. You don't, when I think that anything in an extreme is where you start to become worried, right? If it becomes all consuming. But I think to be able to to bring that person in to a celebration or to create a celebration around them, is a beautiful way to keep honoring them and keep them sort of in the front of your mind and present, and a place to keep pouring your love for them, right? Because they passed, but your love and care for them didn't end. And
Right,
that's sort of what gets, it's like, what do I do with all this love and care and hope and dreams, right? And so you want to still have the traditions and rituals that will give you that sense of, here's a place for me to put this, here's a place for me to pour it into. So I think that that can be very healthy to do. And I want to say this, I think that some of what we're talking about can extend beyond grief, even in right now. I know because of the pandemic, and it's been
yes.
so hard for people to get into the holiday spirit, whatever that normally looks like for you.
Mhm.
Right, it's been hard to even get to whatever that normal looked like. And I would say that again, don't be too hard on yourself. It's okay that it may not look like it's looked in other years, but if there are particular traditions or rituals around the holiday that do feel good to you, then do them. Do them, incorporate them, because they do help to give our life a sense of structure and meaning. They do help to break up that this isn't just a regular Thursday, right? Or whatever day of the week. It's so those things can be valuable and can be really helpful. But they may need to look a little bit different depending on where you're at emotionally, and that's okay as well.
Good. Yeah. For me, having this tree up, even though it's only half done,
Mhm.
I to see it lit up just makes it changes my energy, right? And I'm about energy. I'm about like what the house smells like. So I have my diffuser on, and I think right now I'm doing like some lemon ginger mixed together, and the ambiance. So I like a dark. I don't like a lot of like, artificial light. I
Mhm.
want it to be kind of natural and earthy and just grounding. And just to just see my tree when I look up changes my mood. Like it literally changes my mood, or walking past and seeing, my boys on the tree and the things that they've done over the years and celebrating that is part of my ritual that I haven't really been present in because of moving. And
Mhm.
so this year, because of COVID, as you said, I was determined that I was going to have something in this space, even though I don't have a house full of kids running around to enjoy it. I'm here.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to enjoy it.
Mhm.
So, so are there any other information that you want to share with our viewers, whether they're a grief survivor or whether they're part of the village, that for this holiday season that we didn't cover in your expert voice, Miss Raven?
I will say that grief is something that is universal, and that at some point we all will have some experience of it. Um, at the same time, and I think that that helps us to be can help us to be empathetic to that experience, right? Empathy meaning I can understand what you may be experiencing, but it's important not to say, well, because I experienced grief in this way, I know how it should be for you.
Right.
It's also important, if you are the person experiencing the grief, to realize, again, like we talked about before, there is not a one size fits all. That I would encourage people to get those supports, whether that is therapy, whether that is participating in a workshop or a group. Even if you feel like I'm handling this okay, give yourself that option and that space so that you can do the processing that you need to do. I know, something that has come up. I've heard it, and you actually referenced it today. Was just worrying about the loss of somebody's memory, right? And really being fearful of them being forgotten. And
Mhm.
so I think that's something that many survivors can certainly relate to. And if you are in that village, or I think that is a beautiful gem, that for that person, they want to know that you have not forgotten. We will not forget this loved one, and they are not alone in carrying that memory. And that loss is complicated. I think when we lose somebody, initially, it's very, we highlight all the beautiful, wonderful things about them.
Yeah.
But it is complex. Life is complex. Relationships are complex. And at a certain point, it's okay to also talk about what were the hard times, what were the times where there were challenges,
Right.
because that is the whole person, right? It does not mean you don't love them, you didn't love them. But some of what you may be grieving is, wow, I was so frustrated that this was still going on with them, and it hurts that we never got that resolved. So that other piece can also, be isolating when you feel like we're talking about all the happy glossy stuff, but we're not talking about some of the stuff that we didn't get, they didn't get to resolve. And I still love them, and I want to honor them as a whole person. So I think that that can be valuable also.
I just wanted to add, because you touched on therapy, and just to highlight again my journey. I'm 10 years in, so I'm 10 years in from losing my son, right, when he was killed. And um, the therapy process started initially for my youngest son, and then I also was seeing a therapist on my own.
Mhm.
We both have been going through therapy on and off throughout that time.
Mhm.
There are pockets of time where I know I need to check in, or I know this is my trigger. I know that the anniversary date of uh, him being killed and the birthday are my triggers. I also know that the holiday can be a trigger and the beach is a trigger. So
Mhm.
those are things I've learned about myself, right? So I know that there are times that I need to check in. Therapy doesn't have to be this continuous thing that you go through. And it doesn't always look like I'm going to see a therapist for a year and then I'm good and I'm never going to go back, right? Once you establish that relationship with the therapist, and I'm just speaking on my side of the coin, I don't want to bring anybody else up to speed. I want to check in with someone who already knows my journey. My therapist was my son's therapist. And then after she stopped seeing him, I started seeing him, right? So she knows my journey, she knows my family, she knows my history, she gets it. So my catch-up time with her is very minimal because she already knows like what's we've worked together.
Right.
So we already are connected. I say that to give people permission to seek therapy and
Mhm.
also to give them permission to give it a chance and to understand it's your journey. It doesn't have to be this continuous cycle. It
Mhm.
could be until you feel strong enough and you good, but then you can always go back to it when you need it.
Mhm.
For me, I know I'm always going to need therapy because there are just emotions that I can't process myself, and it's worked well for me. So I
Mhm.
just want to celebrate and highlight therapy, how important I feel that it is, and also to give you clarity. You
Mhm.
know, I look at them as like my emotional coaches. You know, you have a business coach, have an emotional coach that gives me permission to do the things that I feel that I want to do because inside of grief too there's this space where we don't know.
Mhm.
Can we? Should we? How
Mhm.
is it going to look? You know, and so sometimes you just need someone to be your support team to tell you that it's okay for you to feel the way you feel. It's
Mhm.
okay for you to think the way that you think. And it's
Mhm.
okay for you to move the way that you're moving because
Mhm.
it's your journey.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Right.
I know that was long, but I just wanted to like give people permission for that because I believe in therapy and I really advocate for it. And during the holiday season, I really, really wish everybody the most successful time ever in navigating through your grief. If you're a grief survivor, taking the moments that you need, right? And
Mhm.
finding pockets of time to honor your loved ones in the way you choose, but also for the village to be able to be a support team for your grief survivor and checking in and looking them in their eyeball, even if we just do a FaceTime or a Skype
Right.
and saying,
Mhm.
what's really good?
Right.
Right. Because you
Right.
got me. I'm right
Mhm.
here, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Those
Yeah.
check-ins, especially during COVID, I was about to lose something.
Oh.
Those check-ins, especially during COVID, I think are important. So I'm done. Miss Raven, as always,
Mhm.
thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me back. I mean, this is a tough topic, but it was a good one for us to come back and talk about. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
we're done. This is
Okay.
Paula Marie, and this was a special episode of Black Girls Do Have Amazing Superpowers with Paula Marie and our grief segment. If you like this segment and you want to know more, definitely hit the subscribe button to stay abreast of all of our newest and latest episodes in these internet streets. Alrighty, have an amazing holiday.